Good morning and welcome to Morning Scoop for Wednesday, April 20th. This is your daily Buckeye fix. I'm Tom Orr. The Notre Dame game is in 136 days, the game against Michigan in 220 days. With the spring game now in the rearview mirror and summer camp still about a month and a half away, we are heading into one of the quieter periods on the college football calendar, but there is still a lot going on behind the scenes. Right now, the Buckeyes' full coaching staff is on the road visiting with prospects, and a couple commitments have already come in this week, with more potentially on the way in the coming days or weeks. My guest today is the great Alex Gleitman. He somehow managed to get virtually immediate feedback from what seemed like almost every major player who visited Ohio State this past weekend. He had it like before I got back home after the spring game. Alex, how the heck did you do that?
Well, I'd like to give myself more credit that I'm this some sort of Superman, but no, it's actually a funny story. Obviously, those of you on the board or who listen to the show know I have two young kids, and they keep me quite busy on the weekends. And this weekend was ultimate holiday weekend in my house. It was Passover Friday, Saturday, and then Easter Sunday because we celebrate all the holidays in the Gleitman household. So it was very busy, but those of you who also again listened and whatnot might know I had COVID. My whole family had COVID a couple weeks back, and then that somehow lingered. What I thought was just lingering into a cough and a sore throat, but turned out I somehow turned into strep throat. Didn't find out till the morning, Saturday morning. So wasn't on antibiotics for 24 hours until Sunday morning. So I was contagious. So I did not end up going to my family's house for Passover on Saturday, which for those listening and those on Buckeye Scoop was, I guess, a blessing in disguise because I was literally home alone in my house, just me and my dog. Had nothing better to do after watching the Ohio State spring game other than text, call, message recruits. That's what I did and turned lemons into lemonade, I guess.
Yeah, that was that was quite an impressive feat. There was it was like I got back. We did a post game show, Kevin and Tony and I, and we didn't get home right after the game, but I don't know. 2 hours after the game, I get home and there's just like this like full report that was like, normally you'd see that on like Tuesday, Wednesday. So I was very impressed. And today we're going to be talking about a bunch of those guys and where things stand right now. So you also, in addition to that, just dropped a new edition of your ADEC column on our Ask the Insiders board. Lots of information about a ton of these guys. Let's start with Elijah Rushing. He is a defensive end in the class of 2024. He's from the same program in Arizona that produced Lathan Ransom. So place the Buckeyes maybe trying to build a little bit of a pipeline. Can you give us a little scouting report on him and how he enjoyed his time in Columbus?
Yeah, big, long rush end. He's a young kid, so he's still growing. We'll see how his body fills out, but definitely see him as a taller, longer defensive end at the next level. He's a top 20 kid right now. I mean, it's early, but the composite rankings, I think, have him something like 16 overall. He does not have an Ohio State offer, so that I thought he would get one this weekend, coming all the way from Arizona to visit Ohio State. He actually did not get one. They talked about wanting to build a relationship and go through a process. That's code words for me for wanting to just see him live. So I'm sure Larry Johnson will make his way out to Arizona at some point in the next few weeks now that the evaluation period's open and check out Elijah working out. And I'm sure they'll try to get him back on camp, back for camp this summer. If not, they'll probably try to check out some game film, full game film this fall before they make a decision there. But regardless of the offer or not, I mean, this was a visit that went really, really well. He really enjoyed his time sitting down with Larry Johnson, really liked Ohio State, enjoyed everything they had to offer. And so even though there's no offer right now, I do think Ohio State, if they choose to jump into this one, is going to be a strong contender for Elijah Rushing's commitment. I wouldn't say leader. I wouldn't say anything along those lines yet, but I think, he probably doesn't even know, but He's probably got a top handful of schools in his mind right now that might be standing out, and I think Ohio State would be one of them. I think Notre Dame, I think Oregon are probably two others standing out at the moment, but it's early. I mean, the kid's still a sophomore in high school. He's got a lot of time, and we'll see how things go, but really positive first visit for Elijah Rushing to Ohio State.
All right, and then let's do another defensive end, and from another guy from a high school that Buckeye fans probably remember, Jason Moore. He is a 2023 defensive end from DeMatha in Maryland. That is the same program that produced Chase Young. So they have a little bit of history of producing defensive ends there as well. What kind of a prospect is Jason Moore, and then how serious is he about the Buckeyes right now?
Love Jason Moore. He's I don't know if he's still playing hoops or not, but he's one of those just basketball guys, great athletes, probably about 6'4", 255. I think he'll fill out at the next level and be a 3 tech on the inside at defensive tackle for whatever program he chooses. First visit to Ohio State was a really good visit. Loved sitting down with Larry Johnson. Showed him, what he did with Chase Young, what he did with the Bosa brothers, his plans for him and how he would develop him at Ohio State. LJ is somewhat of a legend in that DMV area. So, between the Chase Young connection and seeing what he did at Ohio State, becoming the number 2 pick overall, obviously had a great start to his career before he got hurt last year with the Washington Commanders, formerly football team, formerly Redskins. And just, knowing what Larry Johnson, what Ohio State can do for you, they're going to be a top choice moving forward. He wouldn't publicly go as far as say Ohio State's going to get an official visit this summer, but kind of hinted to me that was a very likely scenario. And I think Notre Dame, I think Penn State, who does a really good job recruiting that area. I think both of those programs are going to be probably the main competition for Ohio State moving forward, but Alabama's in this one. I know Michigan's in this one as well. So Ohio State's going to have their hands full, but I think if they could get him back on campus, they've got a really good shot to make him a part of this class.
All right, another name to know for 2024 is wide receiver Taizer Denmark. He is from Philadelphia, which is a spot where the Buckeyes have pulled some really good talent in recent years, including at the wide receiver position. So how did his visit go?
Yeah, look, Ohio State, I actually had someone reach out to me before the visit, someone not related to Ohio State at all, just very familiar with the Philly, Pennsylvania recruiting scene, and they had told me, they kind of asked me, would Ohio State take Taizer Denmark? And I said, not really sure, haven't really looked into it. Why? He said, because they're absolutely the favorite, and that was going into the visit. So he went to this visit, he got to sit down with Brian Hartline, he got to sit down with Ryan Day, he got to see what those guys did in the spring game and what the offense looks like and how he would be used and everything that they told him on Friday, he got to see translate to the field on Saturday. I mean, he had a great time. It's public, it's out there, it's free on our site. The article I released with him on Tuesday morning, where he said Ohio State's his leader. He couldn't even lie, couldn't even try to spin it. Ohio State leads for him right now, but he did admit it's really early in the process. I know Penn State's a school he likes a lot. Alabama's a school he likes a lot. There's a few other programs he's got to go out and see and measure Ohio State against. But I think as long as Ohio State continues to recruit him the way that they have, as long as they want him, I think they're going to have a great chance to get him. The question's going to be, as they evaluate these kids the spring, the summer, into the fall, what does the board look like? Where does Taizer Denmark, fall on that board? I think right now he's in a top group of receivers that they're looking at very closely. He's a top 150 kid, a 4-star kid. Interestingly enough, that's not always been good enough for this room the last few years to be able to get into it. So, is that his ranking? Is that his true ranking? Is that how Ohio State feels about him? Or is this a case where Ohio State feels he's someone that can absolutely play in their program at the level that they've been recruiting that position? I think right now it's trending toward yes, maybe that being that situation, but he's got to continue to do his part, and Ohio State's got to make that decision when push comes to shove, probably around this time next year.
Yeah, it's interesting. They have not necessarily been completely beholden to those recruiting rankings. I mean, Bryson Rogers was not, Bryson Rogers is way down the list on a lot of those recruiting sites, and Ohio State just took his commitment, and that is obviously not a position where they're ever reaching for talent. They will obviously do their own evaluations there. But next up, a guy who's a little further along in his recruiting process than Taizer Denmark, and that's Austin Cereville. He is a 2023 offensive lineman, so he has to make his decision a year earlier. So it feels like he's been in that conversation about potential next commitment for quite a while now. Where do things stand with him at the moment after another visit to Columbus over the weekend?
Yeah, Tom, I think you bring up a good point because, he's down to now top 3, Ohio State, Notre Dame, Alabama. I think this Ohio State, Notre Dame battle, and since they offered him back in the fall, which I think was a little bit of a surprising offer to a lot of people, just because they maybe felt it was a kid, at least back then in the fall, that they didn't need to offer at that point. But Ohio State obviously loved what they saw on film or what they saw potentially in person, if anyone was able to go down and see him. Justin Fry, since he's took the job, has continued recruiting Austin pretty hard, so they like him. And I know Mark was very impressed with what he saw at a camp just a few weeks back. So, this visit was big for me because it's been a while since Austin's been on campus, and I started to think this one was kind of fading away from Ohio State a little bit. Just maybe he it wasn't going to happen. But he had an excellent visit to Ohio State. I think just he was very excited talking about this visit. A little bit of a different kind of sentiment and tone and voice than I've experienced from him for past visits. So I think he was really excited, and kind of Ohio State did a really good job kind of getting him excited about their program and about the opportunity there. I think Ohio State, though, was hoping to get a commitment after this weekend. He's going to visit Notre Dame for their spring game this coming weekend. I think they were hoping to avoid that. I don't know. My head and just people I speak to still think that they hold on even after a visit to Notre Dame this weekend. But I mean, Austin told me he doesn't have a timeline for a decision. It could come just whenever the feeling is right. And if the feeling wasn't right after the Ohio State spring game this weekend, I mean, maybe in his head it was, I'm going to take this visit to Notre Dame no matter what, give each program one more chance, take a beat, sit down with my family, my coaches, whoever's involved in that decision, and make the best decision. And that still could be the case. And that's what some of my sources think is going to happen, and Ohio State will edge out Notre Dame. I'm just a little concerned, Cincinnati kids, you get them, you go to Notre Dame, and they have a great time. There's no doubt he's going to have a good time. I mean, the spring game's going to be great. The atmosphere is going to be great. Coaches are young, energetic, have ties to Ohio and that Cincinnati area, or that Western Ohio area. Could he get caught up in the moment and make a commitment to Notre Dame? I think that's something you have to be worried about. And I'm a little personally worried from an Ohio State standpoint. My gut, just telling me that something's a little off here. I don't know, but my head and my sources are telling me that they still think Ohio State's going to come out on top. So this one's going to be interesting to watch. And either way, I think a commitment's probably going to come by the end of May. So we should find out pretty soon.
All right, that'll be a fun one to watch. Next up, a guy who has already played against Notre Dame a couple times in his college career, a transfer, kicker Parker Lewis from USC. That is a really interesting situation to try and figure out between Noah Ruggles being out of town for the spring, the presence of another scholarship kicker in Jake Seibert with a bunch of years of eligibility left. But I mean, it sure sounded like, they brought Lewis in, and it sure sounded like Lewis enjoyed his visit to Columbus.
Yeah, I mean, first talking about the visit, he raved about that visit, and you can read more in my A deck about his thoughts on the visit and where I think things stand there. But ultimately, yeah, I mean, Tom, it's an interesting situation. Noah Ruggles has not been with the team this semester. He's supposed to come back in the summer, and I don't think Ryan Day would say that if he didn't believe it. I mean, you saw what happened with Harry Miller last year, where he wasn't committal to him coming back at a certain point or anything like that. So that's not what we're seeing with Noah Ruggles. I mean, he said he's going to be back with the team in the summer. Could it be simply a graduate student just took a semester away from school and he's a kicker, and they said, hey, look, as long as you work on kicking, we don't really care what you do? Sure, that's a possibility. It doesn't seem like something I've seen ever. So, maybe there's something personal going on, maybe sick family member. I don't know what's going on there, but I think whether it's because of their concern that Noah Ruggles may not end up back with the team, or to the other side, they're just not completely sold on Jake Seibert being the kicker of the future yet. Why else would you bring a kicker in to visit? And just from talking to some people, I don't know if he wants to commit. I don't know what they do. I think it probably, they're going to gather as much information, evaluate Jake Seibert. Where do we feel he is? What's the deal with Noah Ruggles? I mean, maybe it's just a low risk, high reward type thing. You take this kid anyway. At worst, he helps on kickoffs because he does have a solid track record of getting it out of the end zone, which has been a problem for Ohio State. I know it hasn't been a strategy, but it seems like it's also been a problem. So I don't know. It'll be interesting. He mentioned a few other programs off the top of my head: Notre Dame, Miami, Ole Miss. There was one or two others in there that he was looking at closely, and he told me he's going to make a decision in the next 2 to 3 weeks. He raved about the visit. I know he followed you. He followed every single Ohio State coach. To me, after talking to him, it seemed like a kid who wanted to commit to Ohio State. But let's see what happens when that visit high wears off a little bit. Let's see how Ohio State handles the situation if they push for that moving forward. I guess I don't know what the situation is going to be with scholarships or things like that. But again, if it's a low risk, high reward situation, you can, between the two of them competing, and even if Noah Ruggles is fine this year, maybe he can handle kickoffs. But then after that, is it Seibert and him competing, and whoever wins the job stays, and whoever doesn't ends up hitting the portal? Like, competition breeds excellence. So even if that's the case, why not bring the kid on and let him get a shot?
Yeah, the scholarship numbers are kind of interesting right now because they're and after the transfer of Jacoby Cowan, I should have looked this up before the show, but they're either at 86 or 87, but they are functionally close enough to 85 that it's not really a concern because you're going to have more transfers in the coming weeks. That's just sort of how it goes after spring ball. Usually you get 3, 4, 5 transfers pretty much every year, and that number seems like it's only ticking up now with the advent of the transfer portal, and you don't have to sit out a year. So the 85 number, I think people might be wondering, well, if they're over, why would they even be considering this? Well, they're probably not going to be over for very long. Those are numbers that have always found a way to work themselves out, and they are very close to that 85 number already, so I don't think that's a real big concern. Before I let you go, we do need to talk about Dylan Raiola. It is because he is the number 1 quarterback and number 1 overall player in the class of 2024, so therefore everyone wants to hear about Dylan Raiola, so we're going to give the people what they want. He just wrapped up a visit to Ohio State for the spring game over the weekend. It doesn't sound like he's planning on taking any additional visits anytime in the near future, and you can correct me if I'm wrong about that, but where do you think things stand with the Buckeyes and Dylan Raiola right now?
Yeah, let's put it this way. I'm a little surprised that he hasn't committed at this point, at least at the recording of this article, podcast. Who knows by the time we actually put it out what could happen, because that's just how things seem to work in this world of recruiting. But yeah, to me, it's a matter of when, not if. Second visit in 3 weeks. He didn't come back for fun to give Ohio State another look and to check out. He came back to do business. I think he's informed the staff already of his intentions to join this class. I think he's just probably figuring out, how do I want to announce this thing? Am I filming a video? Am I going to have a press conference at my school? Am I going to do the whole, ESPN or CBS on air type of thing? So I think it's just a formality at this point. I think Ohio State's going to get a kid who some of the services have ranked number 1 overall, forget number 1 quarterback. Jaden Davis not coming to town when he was supposed to, and tweeted as recently as Thursday that he was supposed to, is plenty telling if you don't want to believe me otherwise. So that's all I have to say. I think Ohio State's getting this kid.
Yeah, no additional visits for him anywhere else, and the Jaden Davis thing were two pretty if you have been paying any attention to recruiting at all over the years, you can probably do the math on that one. It all seems to be pointing kind of in the same direction. So the when is kind of the big drama, it seems like, on that one right now. You just had a great episode of your podcast Around the Oval this week. Let people know who you had on.
Yeah, I brought on a recent commit, Bryson Rogers. You mentioned him before. Ranked as like a high 3-star, low 4-star, but I think he is going to finish as a top 100 player. I think he's that good. Very similar trajectory, in my opinion, rankings wise, to what we saw from Jackson Smith-Njigba when he committed to Ohio State. He was actually ranked even lower than Bryson is right now, and ended up, I think, being a top 50, even a 5-star on one of the services. So I could see a meteoric rise for Bryson Rogers once people take a second look at that film and get a closer look at him in person at various events coming up. But great kid, just unbelievable kid. Born in Warren, Ohio. Family from there still lives there. His parents are from there as well. They both now live with him in Tampa. So grew up a Buckeye fan, although lived in Florida his whole life. And really did a great job of separating head versus heart in this recruiting process. But the two ultimately came together. I had a good feeling this was where things were going to go after his March visit to Ohio State, and when he scheduled that return visit so quickly for the spring game, even though he was coming up to Ohio to spend Easter with his family, I had a feeling that this one was going to happen. So it was great to hear from Bryson. Just a tremendous kid. You could really learn a lot about what Ohio State's getting on and off the field from the podcast and video he did with me. So definitely recommend going to our YouTube channel and giving that a listen.
And you can also find that on the podcast platform that you're listening to this on. You can just search Around the Oval or just search Buckeye Scoop, and make sure you subscribe to Alex's podcast, again, Around the Oval. But you can subscribe to all of our great podcasts. Tony Gerderman and I do Buckeye Weekly. Kevin Noon does Big Meat Kickoff. Mark Givler and Bill the Bank Green do Gives in the Bank. Find them all just by searching Buckeye Scoop. Subscribe right there. Leave us a 5-star rating and review as well, which will help other folks find those shows. And also, Alex has been pumping out content at an incredible rate since the spring game. Lots of articles on individual players, and of course that ADEC column on our Ask the Insiders board. So you can read all about all of the players. We barely scratched the surface on the guys that he was writing about this week. So make sure you check that out as well. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.